With the release of Forgotten Realms Heroes of Faerun, we got a bunch of new toys to play with. Of those were some new feats, including Origin, General, and Epic Boon feats. In this video, we're going to be tier ranking each of the new Origin and General feats. I'm going to use the same criteria that I did the last time that I made a feat tier list, which is to say that this list is not based on a strict power ranking, because for me, it doesn't always make a lot of sense. You might see a list that says Warcaster is the best feat in the game, but like, what if your character doesn't cast spells? That's just why that type of list has never appealed to me, because I'm just not typically interested in playing what is the quote-unquote best, but I just kind of want to have a good understanding of what is viable based on what I do want to play. So, with that said, my categories are on screen now. I'm not going to read them out in full, but I'll give a quick summary, which is as follows. Always Good contains feats that are always good. Regardless of your build, you can derive value from these, and they can bolster just about any playstyle in a meaningful way. Build defining are feats which may actually be technically more powerful than those in Always Good. It's just that they tend to be a core or foundational element of a build. Just because it's in a visibly lower tier does not mean that it is necessarily worse. Build dependent is kind of like build defining, but it's just an option to play more of a supporting role rather than the driving force of a build. Niche are feats that you probably need a very specific reason to want to choose. They're not necessarily bad, but they're typically better suited for some unorthodox concepts. And then there's bad feats, which are just bad. There's usually no reason to pick these outside of some absurd concept. Again, this list is really just my opinion of what fits best into each category based on my perspective of what value the game places on certain aspects of play and what does well, quote unquote. The core thing that I'm evaluating is frequency and impact. How often does something tend to happen? And then in that scenario, how impactful that feat is going to be. In no way is this me telling you what to do or how to derive your fun. Pick whatever feat and build whatever character makes you happy. You might disagree with some of my categorizations, and that's completely fine. I'm more than open to any discussion about it in the comments. But really, this is just intended to be for fun and to help some players get an understanding of the landscape of the feats and where certain ones might fall. Alright, with all that out of the way, let's get to discussing them. We're going to go alphabetically, starting with the Origin feats, and then again with the General feats. Oh, and again, we're not going to be looking at the Epic Boon feats in this video. First up is Cult of the Dragon Initiate. This gives us 3 benefits. First, we learn Draconic, or if we know that, we learn another language. Dragon's Terror lets us take the magic action to potentially frighten a target within 30 feet of ourselves on a failed wisdom saving throw. And finally, Inspired by Fear allows us to gain heroic inspiration once per short or long rest if we frighten someone and are the source of that fear. On the face of it, this is not a bad feat. We get a language, an easy way to cause fear, and a way to capitalize on it and gain a valuable resource. But there are a couple of problems. Firstly, we don't get to choose which of the mental stats is used for the saving throw. It's always wisdom based. Now, many characters do tend to have a reasonable wisdom score, but certainly not everyone does, which funnels this a bit towards characters with good wisdoms to begin with. The second issue is that it does take your entire action to use the fear option. Now, this is only really a problem if you're doing this in combat, which, while it's probably the most obvious context, is certainly not the only time that you would want to cause fear. I still think that this is a reasonable feat that has some nice upside. If you were going to build for a character that relies on frightening foes, and as we'll see later, there is a follow-on to this feat, this does actually make it a lot better. So, with all that said, I think Cult of the Dragon Initiate falls into build dependent. It's certainly not the driving force of a character, but there's enough here to get some good value if that's the kind of thing that you're going for. Moving on to Emerald Enclave Fledgling. With this feat, we get the Speak with Animal spell, we have it always prepared, and when we ritual cast it, it lasts for 8 hours. On top of that, when we take the help action, we can switch places with a willing ally within 5 feet of us as part of the same action. That movement also does not provoke opportunity attacks, and the target must not be incapacitated. This has niche written all over it. Speak with Animals, while an extremely fun and potentially valuable spell to obtain information in unorthodox ways, is hardly breaking most campaigns wide open. It's fine. Ritual casting it for 8 hours is admittedly very cool though. The tag team help action swap thing probably has even more niche value though. You need to be within 5 feet of an ally, you need to sacrifice the bulk of your turn to use the help action just to move them 5 feet away, and you can't even do it to down party members since part of the unconscious condition is being incapacitated, which this does not work with. As tempted as I am to say that this is a bad feat, I think there's some reasonable use cases here, however niche. Honestly, the ritual casting of Speak with Animals and having it last for 8 hours is probably the only thing keeping Emerald Enclave Fledgling out of the bad territory and into niche. Next up is Harper Agent. This lets us learn Thieves' Cant, gives us proficiency with a musical instrument of our choice, and when we take the help action to assist with an attack roll, the ally can be within 30 feet rather than 5 feet. I don't really know that there's a ton to say about this. You have to really want to be spamming the help action to make this one be any use. It's a nice incidental, and being able to do it within 30 feet is pretty great. But I would certainly be willing to bet that 99 times out of 100, there will be something better to do with your turn than just giving someone advantage on their attack roll, even if it is within 30 feet of them. Make no mistake, there are absolutely moments where this is going to make sense, but those are likely few and far between. And based on the poll that I put out yesterday, it looks like the vast majority of people are rarely or even never using the help action at all. Based on the comments, they either have a familiar or sidekick to use it, to which this feat does not apply to, or they use it when they have literally nothing else to do. Granted, this does give you a reason to want to use it more, but I don't think the range increase is worth it. I think of it kind of like the old True Strike. Spending a turn to get advantage on your next turn is just worse than 2 attempts to hit something on consecutive turns. Sadly, Harper Agent is going to end up as our first bad feat, of which there will be plenty more. Moving on, Lord's Alliance Agent allows us once per turn, when we score a critical hit, to choose an ally within 30 feet of ourselves who lacks Heroic Inspiration and give it to them. As a reminder, Heroic Inspiration allows you to reroll any die, not just specific d20 tests. And secondly, Reassert Honor lets us, when an enemy deals damage to an ally of ours within 5 feet, to gain advantage on our next attack roll against that enemy before the end of our next turn. This is actually a really good option. The requirement to need to crit obviously makes it a bit of a tough pill to swallow, but I think for champion fighters specifically who have an increased crit range, or fighters of any variety that get so many extra attacks, or barbarians with reckless attack, or if you have the elven accuracy feat, there are just so many ways to pretty significantly increase your likelihood at critically hitting and fairly reliably being able to give out at least one, if not more of these, per round, which can just go off. Plus, just an easy way to gain advantage if you're near an ally, therefore boosting your opportunity to crit, is pretty sweet. I actually think this one can be build defining. Crit Fisher builds will absolutely love a way to bolster with Heroic Inspiration. Next up, we have Purple Dragon Rook. This one gives us proficiency with Insight, Performance, or Persuasion, but it also allows us, when we roll initiative and are not incapacitated, to choose a number of creatures equal to our proficiency bonus within 30 feet and grant them Heroic Inspiration. We can only do this once per long rest though. This is obviously just a great feat overall. It's not breaking the game, but it provides a solid value to essentially anyone. Musician is already an excellent origin feat, and that provides a similar benefit after a short or long rest, but does not also give you a skill proficiency. It's clear that the design team is looking to find more ways to provide Heroic Inspiration, and this is a very simple one that works well and is consistent. This feat is always good. Moving on to Spellfire Spark. This allows us once per turn, when we take damage from a spell or magical effect, to reduce the total damage by 1d4, provided that we are not incapacitated. And also, we get the Sacred Flame cantrip and can use it as a bonus action an amount of times equal to our proficiency bonus per long rest. This is another excellent feat. Magic absorption is quite reasonable, especially at lower levels. Obviously 1d4 isn't exceptional later and doesn't scale, but since you can do it every turn, it's better than nothing and is totally free. Most importantly though, it isn't limited to spells. Since so many monster damaging abilities have moved away from spells to spell attacks as part of the attack action, they'd still qualify as magical effects, and this would work on those too. Plus, it can also work on some magical traps. Also, for classes that don't always have consistent ways to weaponize or use their bonus action, getting Sacred Flame a few times per long rest is pretty great as a free bonus. This feat is also going in always good. Next up is Tyro of the Gauntlet. This makes it so that when an ally that is within 5 feet of us is subjected to an effect that will push or pull it, we can use our reaction to prevent that push or pull. Okay? The extra weird thing here is that not us, but the ally can't be incapacitated to receive this benefit. This is super strange, since that technically implies that us, the ones stopping them from being moved, can be incapacitated, but the dude that's just laying there, nah, we can't do anything about that. Anyway, the other benefit that it gives us is Vigilant, which makes it so that when we take the ready action, the next attack made against us has disadvantage until the start of our next turn. Both of these are so extremely situational and are truly not worth the feat unless there's some crazy niche scenarios. Sadly, there's no place that this one can go other than bad. And our final origin feat is Zhentarim Ruffian. This allows us, when we make an opportunity attack, to roll the damage dice twice and choose either of the rolls. Conveniently, this is not saying weapon damage, so if there are other bonuses that have been tacked onto the damage, even sneak attack for example, it applies. We get to roll all of them twice and choose which one we're using. This can be really good for obvious reasons. The second benefit that it gives us is family first, which makes it so that when we roll initiative and have heroic inspiration, we can spend it to give ourselves and our allies advantage on the initiative roll. This can be really good and works so well in combination with the alert feat or some of the others like Purple Dragon Rook, which distributes heroic advantage. The issue really is that it kind of requires you to hold onto it and not use it for its otherwise intended purpose, but then you do get a nice perk for doing so. It's a bit situational in that it requires a very specific resource, which there are not a ton of ways to get, and of which you can only have one of. I think that there are certainly ways to use this feat, particularly the exploit opening portion as part of a build, so I'm going to be dropping it in build dependent, but I could easily see this scaling up way higher than that. Overall, the origin feats are kind of a mixed bag. Some are really good, and others are just so niche and provide such a small benefit that only a tiny minority of players are ever going to use them. But when they do, I'm sure they're going to feel great about their picks. Moving on to the general feats, we're going to begin with Coldcaster. Just like in the player's handbook though, every one of the general feats requires us to be at least level 4, and some have other requirements as well, but they do also all come with an ability score improvement. So, Coldcaster. This lets us bump our intelligence, wisdom, or charisma by 1, and it also gives us the Ray of Frost cantrip, or another wizard cantrip if we already know that one. And once per turn, if we hit a creature with an attack roll and deal cold damage, it automatically suffers a 1d4 penalty to their next saving throw that they make before the end of our next turn. Overall, this is a great feat. Getting a bump to any of the mental stats is solid. Ray of Frost is a reasonable spell, but more importantly, it can also be swapped with another cantrip if we already have that one. And it doesn't even have to be one that deals cold damage. It could be any wizard cantrip. But then the icing on the cake is that just by dealing cold damage, we can impose a reasonable penalty to a saving throw. The nice part here is that it only procs when we hit and deal cold damage, so it's not something that we need to decide first and then we just end up missing our attack. Plus, there's plenty of ways to make cold damage work. The obvious way here is with the new Winter Walker Ranger, but it's certainly not alone. I think this is a great feat that can easily be built around. I'm going to put it in build defining. Next is Dragonscarred. This feat not only requires us to be level 4, but also to have taken the Cult of the Dragon Initiate Origin feat, which was the one that let us use our magic action to frighten people. As a reminder, we also dropped that one in build dependent. With Dragonscarred, we can bump Constitution or Charisma by 1, so it is a bit more limited, especially given that we likely want to be bumping Wisdom, given that our Fear feature from the Origin feat required it, but I guess it's not too bad. Then we get a resistance to any one of Acid, Cold, Fire, Lightning, or Poison. And finally, whenever we deal damage as part of either the attack or magic action on our turn, we can use the Dragon's Terror benefit as a bonus action on that same turn. So obviously we can't take this one on its own, we do also need to take the Cult of the Dragon Initiate feat, but this one does provide some strong benefits if you intend to have fearing as a core part of the build. I think there's a lot of things that you can work with here. I was debating between dropping it in build dependent or defining, but I think it's just good enough to make it into defining. Fear is a powerful effect, and getting able to use it functionally for free as a bonus action can be excellent. Moving on to Enclave Magic. This one also requires that we have taken the Emerald Enclave Fledgling Origin feat, which was the one that let us ritual cast Speak with Animals for 8 hours, and use the help action to swap with an adjacent ally. Enclave Magic lets us bump Intelligence, Wisdom, or Charisma by 1, and it gives us advantage when using the Influence action with beasts. It also lets us have the Beast Sense spell always prepared, and we can cast it once per long rest for free, and when we cast it that way for free, we don't need to maintain concentration on it. We can also use spell slots to cast it, but we do need to maintain concentration on it if we do that. This, like the Origin feat in the same tree, is just so specific. There's a world where you are living for the Speak with Animals character, but I'm just not sure how much it's doing for you in a typical campaign. You also just get advantage on influence checks with beasts, so you can still totally fail. Find Familiar is a better option in most scenarios if you can get access to it. I'm not convinced this is truly worth the feat. It can be super fun, so for that reason, I'm going to drop it just barely into niche, but I'm really not seeing the dream in most scenarios with this feat. Moving on to Fairy Trickster, this lets us bump Dexterity or Charisma by 1, makes it so that when we take the disengage action on our turn, difficult terrain does not cost any extra movement, and finally allows us when we hit a creature with an attack roll to force it to make a wisdom saving throw, with the DC being determined by the ability that we buffed when we took the feat. If it fails to save, it then has disadvantage on all saving throws until the end of our next turn, and we can use this ability a number of times equal to our proficiency bonus per day. This is a very strong feat. Admittedly, the Fairy Trod Trotter benefit is pretty niche, though it could get some extra mileage from rogues or monks. The Flustering Strike effect is extremely potent. Potentially a full round of disadvantage on saves is massive, and it includes our next turn, which means that if this works once, the creature then has an increased chance of failing so it can work again on our next turn, since they're still going to have disadvantage at that point. Plus, since it works with attack rolls, it can also work with most martial classes, but even casters using a cantrip or another spell that requires a roll. This can easily be built around and can suit pretty much every style of play. Flustering Strike is definitely doing a ton of heavy lifting here, but Fairy Trickster is definitely going in always good. Next we have Genie Magic. This lets us bump our intelligence, wisdom, or charisma by 1, and as a magic action, we can cast a level 1 sorcerer spell of our choice that has a casting time of 1 action, and we can do it once per long rest. When we reach level 11, it's as though it's cast with a 2nd level slot, and at level 17, it's as though it's cast with a 3rd level slot. So this, it's not good. Admittedly, it is nice that there is no set spell. We can choose the one we want whenever we use it, but I'm not sure that I can be convinced that a single cast of a level 1 action sorcerer spell is worth a feat. Plus, the wording is a bit confusing at first, but it is important to note that the way that this scales isn't that it allows us to choose a 2nd level spell at level 11 and a 3rd level spell at level 17. No, it is casting it as though it were with a 2nd level slot and a 3rd level slot respectively. So basically, it is always a 1st level spell, it's just being upcast. In the 2024 Player's Handbook, there are only 18 spells that even qualify for this, and 8 of them don't have any upcasting perk whatsoever, so you're really only left with 10 choices. And yes, there are definitely some reasonable ones here, like maybe Mage Armor or Magic Missile or Sleep or Charm Person, but you're probably going to be so concerned about using this one cast in exactly the right moment that you're going to forget about it most of the time. As I said, I really just don't think that a single cast of a 1st level spell is worth an entire feat at level 4 or higher. This is going in bad. Moving on, we have Harper Teamwork, which requires the Harper Agent origin feat. As a reminder, that was the one that let us use the help action to distract an enemy within 30 feet of us instead of 5. It was also dropped into bad. Harper Teamwork lets us bump dexterity or charisma by 1, and makes it so that when we take the help action to assist an ally's attack on an enemy, that enemy has disadvantage on the first saving throw it makes before the start of our next turn. They are really doubling down on the help action thing here, which is cool in theory. I get it. I'm still not sure that this is going to be the best thing that you can be doing with your turn. It very cleanly falls into the category of, well, I have literally nothing else to do, so I might as well, and I don't think most players are going to be actively seeking out that style of play. Some certainly will, and if you wanted to make a character that was all support all the time, the Harper set of feats are probably a reasonable way to make it happen. But even this benefit is just so niche and small. Depending on how initiative rolls roll out and the ally that you are assisting, you might take the help action to get this benefit, and then not even be able to take advantage of it if you happen to be going next. Or honestly, even if you're not going next, but the next player just can't force a save. And since the perk ends at the start of your next turn, we can't even take advantage of it either. It's just so hard to make this work. If you want to give disadvantage on saves, just take Fairy Trickster, it's so much better. But it actually gives us another benefit, Inspiring Willpower. This makes it so that if we succeed on a save against being frightened or poisoned, we can choose an ally within 30 feet of ourselves that has the same condition and end it for them. I want this to be good, but it is just not. To make it work, an ally needs to already be frightened or poisoned, then we must be subjected to a matching effect. Not either of the two, has to be the same one that the ally has, and then we need to save, and then they also need to be within 30 feet of us. Please, just don't take this feat. This is just bad. It's probably the worst one in the whole book. Next up, thankfully, is Lordly Resolve. This requires that we took the Lord's Alliance Agent origin feat, which was the one that let us give out heroic inspiration to an ally on a critical hit. I dropped it into build defining. Lordly Resolve allows us to bump our strength or charisma by 1, and as a bonus action, lets us choose up to 30 creatures within 60 feet to use their reaction to end the prone condition on themselves. This is fine. It's not incredible, and still requires the use of our bonus action and the ally's reaction. There will be niche circumstances where it's good, but it's nothing to write home about. Then, as part of that same bonus action, we can also bolster our ally's resolve which lasts for 1 minute or until we are incapacitated. During that time, our allies can't be possessed, charmed, or frightened, and if they already have one of those effects, they get advantage on any new save to end it, and we can do this once per long rest. So here's the thing. Standard Bearer does not specifically stipulate that the target needs to actually have the prone condition. It just says that they can use their reaction to end it. So by that wording, it's not unreasonable to assume that you could use this on allies that are not prone just to get the additional bolster resolve effect. If that is the case, this is probably a bit better. Though I feel like the intent here is that allies do need to be prone to use it. I'll hedge in that direction and say that as a result, I'm going to have to drop it in niche. If you could use it regardless of whether or not they are prone, I would put it to at least build dependent, since having ways to effectively clear a bunch of conditions like this could be really good. Moving on, we have Mythal Touched. This lets us bump our intelligence, wisdom, or charisma by 1, and makes it so that if a spell attack hits us, or we fail a saving throw against a spell, we can opt to use our reaction to roll on the Mythal Touched magic table, and we can do this a number of times equal to our proficiency bonus per day. The options are from 1 to 2, us and each creature within 15 feet need to make a dexterity saving throw, failing which we take 1d8 force damage times the level of the spell that triggered the effect. This is terrible. There's some circumstances, I guess, where you could make this work if you're next to a bunch of allies and an ally hit you with a spell and you have some way to guarantee the low roll, but I mean, honestly, that is so sketchy. On a 3 to 7, we can get a telepathic link with the caster, which is kind of fun, I guess. On an 8 to 10, gravity is reversed in a 15-foot radius, 60-foot high cylinder for 1 minute as per the reverse gravity spell. This can be hilarious, but also terrible for us. On an 11 to 13, both us and the caster make a constitution saving throw, failing which we become stunned. Yes, either of us, both the caster or us, can become stunned. This can be awful, again, for obvious reasons. On a 14 to 17, we get a +2 to our AC, which could potentially turn a triggering spell attack into a miss, but if it was a save, it does absolutely nothing. On an 18 to 19, any flammable, non-magical object within 10 feet of the caster that isn't being worn or carried catches on fire. Okay. And finally, on a 20, the spell just dissipates with no effect. The bonus action, or reaction that was used to cast it is wasted, but any spell slot that may have been used is not wasted. Now look, I am so here for wild magic. I think it is so fun, but this is just so bad. Most of these options are things you absolutely do not want to happen to you. I really don't know why you'd ever risk it, unless, like I said, you had some insane plans to nuke nearby enemies with a 1 or 2 roll. The risk to reward ratio on this is absolutely in the dumpster, and I'm gonna have to drop this in bad. Next up is Order's Resilience, which requires the Tyro of the Gauntlet origin feat, which was the one that let us stop an ally from being pushed or pulled, and we also dropped that one in bad. Order's Resilience lets us bump our strength, wisdom, or charisma by 1, and lets us end the prone condition on ourselves by only spending 5 feet of movement, so that's cool. It also makes it so that if we are within 5 feet of an ally who is not incapacitated, then we both get advantage on strength saving throws. Both of these bonuses are just so niche that I can't just see this going anywhere but bad. If it was just straight advantage on strength saves, that would be quite powerful. But because you need to be within 5 feet of an ally and then be subjected to a strength saving throw to make it work, and it's just not something you can rely on or force, this is sadly just going in bad. Maybe on the verge of niche, I guess. Moving on, we have Purple Dragon Commandant. This requires the Purple Dragon Rook origin feat, which let us, when we roll initiative, to give heroic inspiration to our allies, and we put that one in always good. Purple Dragon Commandant, though, lets us bump our strength or dexterity by 1, and it lets us use our bonus action to choose an ally that we can see within 30 feet and give them temporary hit points equal to 2d6 plus the modifier chosen when we took this feat. And we can do it a number of times equal to our proficiency bonus per day. This is a nice bonus. There are a pretty reasonable amount of ways to give out temps in 2024 D&D, and this is just yet another one. It also gives us another benefit, which is that we have advantage on attack rolls while bloodied. This is very nice and very flavorful, but it's hard to opt for a feat that half of it only works when we're getting kind of close to being dead. A way to get free advantage is cool, and this could be a nice get out of jail free card potentially, but I'm just not sure that it's worth it. I'll give them credit for utilizing the bloodied condition though. Overall, between the temps and the ways to get at least a technically free advantage, I'm gonna drop it in build dependent. Maybe some bloodied build becomes viable at some point in the future. Next up is Spellfire Adept, which also requires the Spellfire Spark origin feat, which was the one that let us reduce incoming spell or magical damage by 1d4. We dropped that one in Always Good. Spellfire Adept lets us bump our Intelligence, Wisdom, or Charisma by 1, and once per turn, when we deal damage with a spell that deals radiant damage, we can spend up to 2 hit dice and buff the damage of the spell equal to the amount rolled. There are a reasonable amount of spells that let us deal radiant damage, like Moonbeam, True Strike, Starry Wisp, Guiding Bolt, Spirit Guardians, and Sacred Flame, which Spellfire Spark also gives us. Though there is a reasonable trade here in the form of potential healing. I think there's probably some strong combos here with True Strike or Spirit Guardians, for example, though. On the upside, the feat does actually let our spells ignore resistance to radiant damage, but that's not all that common. This is a fine feat. I think it's build dependent, though maybe on the verge of defining if you have some crazy combo in mind that can leverage the extra hit dice and you're not worried about losing out on some healing. Next up we have Street Justice, which is such a good name. It lets us bump our strength or dexterity by 1, and it also gives our allies advantage on attack rolls against creatures that are grappled by us, which can easily be a core part of a build and is very strong. It also lets us add our proficiency bonus to the escape DC of chains, manacles, or rope, which is pretty fun. And finally, it also makes it so that hostile creatures don't impose disadvantage on our intimidation checks to influence them. This is a super fun, flavorful, and powerful feat that can certainly be the driving force of a build, and as such, it's going in build defining. I can just picture one of the characters from my previous campaign running up, grappling enemies, punching them in the throat, and just holding it there for the party to wreak havoc on them. I love it. And our final general feat is Zhentarim Tactics, which also requires the Zhentarim Ruffian origin feat, which is the one that let us roll damage dice twice on opportunity attacks and spend heroic inspiration to give everyone advantage on their initiative. We put that one in build dependent. Zhentarim Tactics lets us bump our dexterity or constitution by 1 and makes it so that immediately after a creature within 5 feet hits us with a melee attack to make an opportunity attack against them. And remember, we can roll our damage dice twice and choose which one to use. It also lets us, when we take a long rest, to choose any skill that we have proficiency in and gain expertise in it, which lasts until we finish a long rest. Both of these abilities are very strong. A floating expertise to drop anywhere we want is never something to be upset about, and an easy way to proc opportunity attacks and deal tons of bonus damage is even better. This is easily a build-defining feat. Overall, I think a lot of the feats in this book are kind of hit and miss. I sort of get what they were trying to do with these pseudo-feat trees, requiring certain ones to have an earlier feat be taken, though I'm really just not sure that it ends up working out. On the one hand, I think it could have been kind of interesting if you started with a lower mid or reasonable origin feat to have it be buffed up to a really good one if you took the subsequent feat. But then that kind of ends up leading to a little bit more homogenization and forcing characters, or feeling like you're forcing characters, into taking this tree every single time. On the other hand, the way that they did it, some are just obviously really good to take. The Zhentarim one or the Purple Dragon ones are both really good, but then there's other ones like the Gauntlet ones or the Harper ones, which are just so bad. I just don't understand what exactly they thought they were going for here. Maybe they were just going for a flavor play and it's not really any deeper than that. So that's it. That is my ranking of all the new feats in the Forgotten Realms Heroes of Faerun book. Let me know your thoughts on these in the comments. I'm really curious to hear what you have to say. Check out some of my other videos, but otherwise, take care.